car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The Attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into The Attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. We always appreciate the time, and I want to just remind you before we jump into tonight's topic of conversation, a couple of neat things that Hollis Wright makes available all throughout the program. You see information at the bottom of the screen how you can join our conversation tonight. It's always better when you join us. Also, attorneys from the firm of Hollis Wright are standing by right now. So if in the course of the next half hour, a question pops into your mind and you would like to speak to an actual lawyer, you can pick up the phone and give them a call. That conversation will take place off the air. Leading our conversation, as he often does, is managing partner of the firm Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
You too. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. You?
Good. Doing great. You know, around this time of year, credit card debt, amounts you owe third parties, debt can mount, and it can stress people out. So we're going to do a show today, David. We're going to do a show about kind of collections in that process, and if you've got a debt that someone owes you, how to collect, but also kind of how to manage the collection process itself if things are not going the way that you want them to go from a financial perspective. And Trey McClure is with us today from Schwartz McClure. Trey's an expert in this area, and as Trey can tell you, I promise, this is not something every lawyer does. You have to understand the inner workings of this type of business and this work in order to really be good at what you do.
That's absolutely true.
How did you get into this? Because this is really a specialty of the law that's so critically important, especially in Alabama. One of the statistics you provided to me before this started is we're 34th. Alabama's 34th with credit card debt in the country.
Right.
That's a lot of credit card debt.
That is, and there's a lot of credit card debt, and with that comes other debt as well. When somebody if somebody owes a lot of credit card debt, usually that's going to snowball. It's going to turn into other things. They're going to owe other people money, other groups. How I got into it, I spent the first probably 7 or 8 years of my practicing of my law career doing litigation. I worked for a big litigation firm, for a small litigation firm. And then about 2013, we had a situation where my wife was working with her father. Her father had been a collection lawyer for 36 years. She had come up through the place. She had worked there since she was 12 years old, stuffing envelopes. But she was pregnant with our second son, and he had gotten sick. And at some point they realized that they were going to have no lawyers in the office very soon, and they needed somebody. I happened to be there and be available, looking for something to do for a change of pace, basically. And so I came in and started working with them, and now she and I run the practice, and we've been working there 4 years, and somehow have survived, and as our marriage.
Sometimes the law finds you, sometimes you find the law.
That's the truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way that works right there. That's great. Well, all right. So let's kind of jump off into this topic because it's a unique area of the law, and I do want to kind of cover a lot of stuff tonight. All right. So one of the things I know that you mentioned in kind of the pre-production material that I've looked at is if you can avoid collecting a debt outside of court, is that preferable than inside court?
Every time.
Okay. Explain that a little bit.
If you take a case to court, you're going to incur extra expenses, paying court costs, fees, getting things served. It takes a lot longer, and then your ultimate return tends to be a little less. So if you can, what I always tell people when they call me up and they say this guy owes me money, they tell me he's done this, but whatever happened, I tell them, look, if there is any way you can work this out so that you can, work out a payment plan, maybe a reduced lump sum, something like that. If you can do that, it's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of hassle, a lot of effort. And that's what I try to do. When we have a case come in, the first thing we do, it's required by the federal government, but we send out a demand letter, letting them know this is who you owe money to, this is what you owe, this is how to contact us. Please contact us, because we're very understanding. If somebody wants to work it out and make payments, then we are always willing to do that. Yeah. And I found that in most cases, people that owe money want to make it right. Yeah. They don't want to just skirt the issue, get away from it, hide, because they know they can't hide forever. Yeah. And it's just going to snowball. It's just going to continue to grow. And so if you can work something out with them, call them, contact them, email, letter, whatever you can do to get in touch with them, and be civil. Yeah. That's the biggest thing I always tell people. Don't call them and yell at them and call them every name in the book. Call them up, say, look, you owe me this money. Let's work this out. Yeah. And it works a surprising amount of the time.
When do you recommend that you get a lawyer involved? Like, let's say you got a debt that's $2,000 that someone owes. Do you get a lawyer involved at that stage, or is there a certain number, a threshold that you get to where you're trying to collect where you think a lawyer should get involved? How does that work?
There are different factors. It depends on several things. If the debt is over $10,000, then that's going to bump it up to circuit court. I always recommend a lawyer there because the judges are a little less forgiving. The rules are much stricter, and they're very. It's just a lot more complicated. Other things, if you're a corporation, and I don't remember that. I know there was a move to change the rule recently, but I know that in circuit court, a corporation cannot represent themselves. Yeah. So if it's over $10,000, you have to. You're legally required to. But if you've got a whole bunch of people that owe you money, if you're a store or something like that, and you've got a pretty big book of people that owe you money, you're definitely going to want to hire an attorney just to handle it and themselves, get it off your books and get it out of, make it something that you're not so worried about. And also, if it's going to be a complex issue, if it's if the other side says no, I don't owe this money, prove it. Yeah, hire an attorney. Go ahead and let them.
And I was going to ask you a little bit about this. I know this is not a bankruptcy show at all, but I've always heard this concept that if a debt amount owed to a single creditor rises to a certain level, it can impact whether or not somebody can involuntarily push you into bankruptcy. Is that do you dabble in that area?
I don't. Okay. Honestly, my wife handles my wife handles the bankruptcy stuff.
I've heard that number's $10,000, and I don't know as a lawyer if that's accurate or not. I do know this: at some level, if you owe debt to an individual or a corporation, a company, you lose control of your ability to manage potential bankruptcy, and that's why you want to do what you're talking about, which is getting a lawyer involved and trying to assist with paying that debt in some way, whether it's through a structured plan or a program, to be able to get that debt knocked down.
Sure.
So that it's just those the law always changes too. So if you hear any inconsistency today from what you may have heard on the news, I promise you a lot of it has to do with the debt collection laws change all the time.
Right.
We do a lot of shows where things are adjusting. We talk about grandparent rights on shows all the time. That area of the law in the child custody side of the law has changed so many times that I'm not even sure where the law stands right now. The same thing is true in the debt collection area. There's always a new statute or something coming out that changes.
There's a saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, right? Listening to radio, I hear these ads all the time where, if you have debt, you come do this, and there are these testimonials, air quotes. I don't know if they really are testimonials or not, but people saying, I owed $30,000, and then they wiped it out completely. No hits to my credit. All these amazing claims of what can be done to help you get rid of debt that you owe. Is that saying true in that instance? Because that does sound too good to be true.
Well, people sign up with those groups, and a lot of times they do help. They're better negotiators a lot of times than an individual is. We run into the situation though where if we've filed suit against somebody and then somebody calls claiming they represent them, well, if you're not the attorney of record in that case, you don't represent them. And I can't legally talk to you about the case.
Right.
There are federal rules about what I can say to people, about debts owed, and there are things that I just can't disclose. But a lot of times, in a situation where they are doing they do come in, they can work out a lump sum payment sometimes. They can work out a payment plan, and sometimes it helps, but typically there's not a lot they can really do that the individual can't do themselves. Yeah. It does take a lot of work for the individual, and sometimes they do that just to release a little bit of work for them.
Right.
But but there's just not a lot that they can do that's different from what the person can do.
I know we're going to break. When we come back, I want to talk about the potential ways that you can collect a debt if you have filed suit and you're successful in getting a judgment, for example, how you can go collect that debt. There are a lot of different ways you can do it, and we'll talk with Trey about it.
All right, we're headed to break. As we do so, a couple of reminders. you could join our conversation. Would love to have you do so. Also, Hollis Wright, very active on social media, growing, and just a fantastic Facebook community. Search the term Hollis Wright. You'll find them there. Like the page. Great updates of really, the recent legal news. Really helps keep you up to date and knowing your rights. You'll find it there on Facebook, also on Twitter. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Wow, some sobering firm facts there. Welcome back into The Attorneys, talking about debt, credit card debt, all the different kinds of debt, and what are your rights and what you need to know. Would love to have you join our conversation. The information at the bottom of your screen. Also, a reminder, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live to speak with you as well. Josh?
All right, so Trey, we talked in the last segment, and we kind of moved into this topic, which is, all right, if you can't work it out, there's not some amicable resolution to resolving the dispute, and you've got to file suit. How does that process work? And then I want to take it to the next step, which is, if you're successful, get a judgment, how do you collect that?
Sure. Well, then you have to invoke the legal system. You have to file suit. And then you have to get the debtor served, which is a whole nother that's a whole nother situation. And then once you do, you either, if they don't respond or if they agree, then you can get a default judgment. If it's district court, they have 14 days to respond. If it's circuit court, they have 30. And if they don't respond, then you can either file for a default, or if they respond saying, I agree to everything, you can file for a consent judgment. A lot of courts will do that automatically, but most places you have to file for it. And then, but if they deny it, then you have to go to court. And to reiterate what I was saying before, when you get to court, the first thing the judge is going to say is, have you worked it out? Have you had a chance to talk? And they're going to send you outside the courtroom and see if you can, one last ditch effort to work it out. That's why I always emphasize, try to work it out before you file suit. Yeah. Because, if you file suit and then you work it out outside the courtroom, then you've spent all that money on court costs, all that money getting served for nothing.
If you have filed a suit, or you need to file a suit, do you recommend that people do that on their own, or do you think you've got to have a lawyer involved at that stage?
Again, it depends on the situation. If it's circuit court, I would usually recommend hiring an attorney. Yeah. If the law requires it, if you're a corporation, then yes. If it's a small claims case, or a smaller district court case, small claims is under 6,000, district court is between 6,000 and 10,000, then sometimes you can handle it yourself. The judges tend to be a little more lenient in district court. They're used to having people that are not represented by attorneys. They're used to dealing with a lot of people that are not familiar with the court system, and so they will work with you a little more, and it's a little less complicated. But if you're just not comfortable with it, if you're not comfortable with the idea of figuring out how to get somebody served with process, figuring all that out, then I still do recommend hiring an attorney.
All right, so let's assume that you've got a judgment now, and you've gone through this process, whether it's a consent judgment, an agreed judgment, or whether or not you've actually tried a lawsuit and you've been successful. How do you collect that? Because that is just as complicated as getting the suit filed, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I would say that the garnishment process is the most complicated of all.
Yeah.
Because when you garnish somebody, you've got to either find employment or a bank account. You've got to serve the employer, the garnishee, which is either the employer or the bank. You've got to serve the debtor again. You have to serve because they have to be notified of their rights in the situation. And then you have to get an answer from the garnishee, which is, whether we do have the money, they do work for us, they don't, whatever it is. And then actually get them to produce that money to the court, at which point you then have to petition the court to give you the money. It's a many-step process, and there are things that'll trip you up along the way because at every step.
Yep.
Because clerks want everything done. The court clerks want everything done exactly right. Yep. They've got a certain way that they like things done, and every county is different. We find that because we work statewide, and what works in Madison County doesn't work in Jefferson County, doesn't work in Tuscaloosa County, and some of them are very helpful. They'll tell you, look, this is what we want from you. Some of them just won't answer you to say, just figure it out yourself. Right. You can also, if you do a property search, you find that they own property. You can record the judgment. You get a certificate of judgment from the clerk. You can record that judgment in any county where they own property, and that is it's kind of a slow burn because you really probably aren't going to get anything right away. Right. But down the road, if they look to sell the property or if they look to buy more property, that's going to show up in a title search, and they're going to have to pay you before they can sell that property. And so that's something we do a lot, and that's something that if we're not able to garnish, if we're not able to get them to pay, it pays. Sometimes it'll pay off down the road. Yeah. And then the other thing you can do is a sheriff's sale. You can petition the sheriff's office to either go to their property and find out any property they have and go basically grab it and sell it. Gotcha. But every county works differently that way, and sheriffs, and it's a lot of work for the sheriffs. They don't like doing it. Yeah. So that's not something we do very often. It's not something we found to be particularly successful, especially in smaller cases.
Yeah. So a lot of useful information there, from filing the suit to if you've got a judgment, how to go collect it. When we come back, we'll unpackage that just a little bit, but I also want to talk about things you can do to kind of protect yourself from being sued by a credit card company and those types of things, and when you need to get lawyers involved.
All right, we're stepping aside. Now we're final break of the evening. As we do so, a couple of reminders. We'd love to have you check out the firm on social media. If you search the term Hollis Wright, you'll find them on Facebook, and on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned, more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Tyler Vail with the law firm of Hollis Wright. In court, attorneys are not allowed to tell juries certain things. For example, we cannot talk about a defendant's net worth, meaning the defendant's ability, resources, or insurance to pay a verdict. In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, why can't lawyers talk about a defendant's net worth to a jury? Rule 403 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states, although relevant, evidence may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of the issues, or misleading the jury, or by considerations of undue delay, waste of time, or needless presentation of cumulative evidence. Long-standing Alabama cases have held that the net worth of a defendant falls under this catch-all rule. The reasoning behind the rule is that if a jury knows a defendant is wealthy, then the jury might award more money to the plaintiff. And this goes one step further. If an attorney makes any remarks that suggest the defendant is responsible because he is rich and the plaintiff is poor, that can be grounds for a new trial. If you're ever on a jury, the reality in our state is this. In almost every lawsuit that goes to trial, the attorneys representing both the plaintiff and the defendant have already looked at whether there is sufficient insurance coverage or assets to satisfy a verdict. The reality is this. The parties would not pursue a civil lawsuit if damages could not be paid after a jury returns a verdict. So even though lawyers cannot mention the net worth of a defendant during a trial, there could still be resources available to pay a verdict in court. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in, That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the Attorneys, talking about understanding collections, all about debt and what you need to know. A reminder, this is our final section and segment of the show, so the attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live just for the next 10 minutes or so, so take advantage of that. If you've got a question, you need some free legal advice with an attorney, the opportunity is right here upon you for the next 10 minutes or so. Josh?
All right, so we saw that firm fact coming back in from break that everybody else did, which is the average Alabamian has $137,000 in debt. Right. Let's assume you're overwhelmed. You are in a circumstance where you can't pay for that, and you're drowning a bit. You're starting to get calls or letters or lawsuits. How do you manage that from that point forward? I mean, putting your head in the sand is not the answer, I'm assuming. Everything you've said thus far is, look, try and work through these things respectfully and civilly. But how do you manage that when you're a little bit upside down, trying to figure it out? Do you go get counsel? How does that work?
You can. Typically, people don't. What I always say is, look at it. If you're getting calls, if you're getting letters, if you're getting, if you've gotten sued, the response is basically the same. Look at what at the debt that they're claiming you owe. If it's legitimate, if you do in fact owe it, if it's, if you went to the hospital and you owe this money, you owe the money. If that's the case, call them, contact them immediately, try to work it out. Most places, if you actually contact, for us, what we do, if somebody contacts us, if somebody actually calls me, I'm going to be a lot more lenient with them. I'm going to be a lot more understanding, and I'm going to work with them. I'm going to try to give them every opportunity I can to pay this off in a way that is not going to put them out of their house. It's not going to put them in bankruptcy. If they lose their house, if they go into bankruptcy, that helps nobody, especially not me. So call them up, talk to them, figure out what's going on. Figure out what you can do. If you look at it and you say, I've never been to that place, I don't know what they're accusing me of, what this is about, you can deny it. You can, if it's a letter or a call, you can write a formal written denial and demand strict proof that you actually owe this money. If you've been sued, then go down to the courthouse, go to the clerk's office. They have forms there. You can, and it has boxes you can check. I deny that I'm responsible at all. I admit that I owe some money, but not the full amount. Or I admit that I owe all this money. And if you really don't owe that money and you are sure that you don't owe that money, fight it. Make them prove it. They have to prove it in court.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that. I know this is a little off topic, but what about this concept of kind of protecting your credit at all times, doing everything you can to make sure you got good credit? I mean, these two things are intertwined, aren't they? I mean, a lot of times debt collection and making sure, like, if you've got a dispute on your credit report and you're checking your credit report yearly, is there a way to dispute that where you can put a note in your file to let people know this is not a debt I owe or it's being challenged? How does that process work?
That's a mystery. Yeah. We try to help people work with the credit bureaus, and each one of them works differently. Yeah. Each one of them has a different process for doing that, and each one of them has a different level of success, I've found. You call one of them and this is going to work, and call another one, this is going to work, and this won't work. Yeah. Whatever, it's really hard to do. But speaking on credit scores, if going back to what I was saying, if you can avoid getting sued, getting a judgment against you, that is what really hits your credit report. If you can work it out to where you don't get sued, your credit score is not going to take as big a hit. And if you can work it out where they don't take a judgment, and that's one thing that a lot of counties in this state have, where Jefferson, Shelby County especially, if you are able to work out a payment plan, then the court will put it on what they call the settled and paying docket, which is a special docket. The court basically puts it aside, says, we're not going to do anything with this. You guys work it out. Once it's paid off, you can file to release the case, to dismiss the case. Okay. No judgments filed, which is very helpful. It's something that we do with so many of our debtors, and it works out very well for everybody. It works out for the creditor because if they miss a single payment, you simply have to write the court, and the court gives you a consent judgment.
And it sounds like that kind of helps your credit too, if you're
absolutely.
doing it that way.
If you can avoid getting a judgment on your credit score, on your credit report, then you're that much better off every time. And that's why I always say, contact the people that you owe money to. Work it out with them as best you can, because the longer you wait, the more you try to put it off, you're gonna incur court costs. You're gonna incur interest. You're gonna incur attorney's fees. It's just gonna snowball, and it gets. I have people calling up saying, I owe $2,000 in this. Why is the judgment for $6,000? Well, that was in 2009, and you never did anything.
Right.
You owe this money, and you owe it. You've just been trying to avoid it this whole time, and well, they're not just sitting there.
So putting your head in the sand is not the answer.
Not a good strategy?
Yeah,
Not at all.
Not a good strategy. You want to try and find a way to work with these folks. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, a lot of these credit groups, folks you owe debt to, they're going to work with you as best they can to try and collect that debt in kind of a civil manner.
We got about 2.5 minutes remaining, but one of the questions we've got here is about the harassing phone calls. What's kind of your advice if folks are just getting hounded, to pay debts? What are kind of the rights there, and what's your advice to them?
Well, there are, because of the abuses that a lot of credit collectors had been doing to people,
right.
They have the federal government stepped in and said, look, we're going to very strictly regulate who you can call, when you can call, what you can say, what you can represent, basically every step of the process. And any violation of that it will incur severe fines for the people that did it. If you feel like you're being harassed, if they're calling you at weird hours, if they're calling you at work, if they're calling your family and saying, hey, do you know this person owes this money? Call an attorney. There are lots of attorneys that handle this. I have friends that make their whole living doing that, and it's I think it's a great thing because you don't need to be harassing people and insulting them to try to get the money from them.
We got time for one more quick question?
About a minute and a half.
Yeah, all right, so real quick. Let's assume you pay the debt off. You worked with them, you resolved the issue, you paid it off. What should you get? Should you get some evidence of that? How
Absolutely.
does that work?
Yeah, if there was a judgment, then you should get a satisfaction of judgment, which they would actually file with the court, and then you'll get a notice of it. If there was a lien put on your property, then they will send you a lien satisfaction that you then have to take to probate court and get that lien satisfied.
10 seconds from the both of you, if you don't mind going first.
quick,
I know. Just a final charge. Final charge from you to viewers.
Just keep things civil. If you owe the money, work it out.
Right.
Yeah, what I'd say is there's definitely a time, and we've seen where you cross the line where you want counsel involved, and this is why we bring experts on the show that know this stuff. Get counsel involved when you get to the point where you can't manage it on your own, because they can help lead, guide, and direct you through the process.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate the advice. Appreciate you being with us as well. We thank you for joining us each and every week on The Attorneys. As we wrap things up, here's how you can get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright, always available to you. We appreciate it so much. We'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.